Welcome to EarthX 2025. I'm Lawrence Ford with Capital Foundation. We are here on a mission to discover genius and amplify the purpose where you're making a better world for us. And I am here today with Julie Fineman and Corrin Breeding, and we are going to have some fun. We're going to talk about three things, and then we'll let the magic come up in the meantime. First one is we're going to talk about why are you here? And I don't mean here or here. I mean on this beautiful earth. And the second is tell me about what you're doing, what you've created in the world with that essence. And then we'll talk about how that makes the world a better place. Sound like fun?
Sounds like a blast.
Awesome. So let's back up the bus for a minute, because off camera we were talking about how this became. And you're our first interview here for EarthX 2025. So I'm honored. Tell us the magic of how this stuff came together, Julie.
Yes, so it is definitely divine intelligence making it happen, because I would never have found my way into taking defunct historic cemeteries that are neglected and turning them into wildlife sanctuaries if we didn't move to Dallas and the house that we fell in love with happened to be right next door to one of those cemeteries. And first it was, I'm not sure if we want to be moving into a home that's right next to this cemetery because of the customs that our culture is brought up in. But the house is so beautiful in a wooded forest, I was able to turn my head to pretend like it didn't exist. Though, before I moved into the house, I did walk into the cemetery to ask my new neighbors that I didn't want to be afraid of the spirits that were there, but I wanted to be good neighbors. And they took me up on that offer.
That's beautiful and fascinating. Yeah. So let's back up even a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
So what is it that brought you to Dallas?
Yes, so my husband's an architect with a specialty in airport design. And we were in San Francisco, and he was designing Terminal 1 for SFO. And when it was time to pull the
San
plug...
Francisco Airport.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was time to pull the plug...
For those non-frequent travelers.
We decided to move to Dallas. And I thought, well, why not? That's the Wild West. It's part of my spirit. I'm an adventurous soul. So that's how we ended up here in Dallas.
Awesome. Corrin, tell me, why are you on this planet? Tell me about your soul. What are you?
I think I'm truly here. I always give honor to those that came before me, so my ancestors. And you're hearing my story, why I do what I do, and how that came from a type of ancestral just history with me. But I really think I'm here to just make the world a better place and to unite people and to go a little bit deeper, and mainly through that, doing that through nature, through creating spaces where people can gather, share ideas, congregate, and just galvanize others to do, the right thing that it's going to take to make this world a better place. I'm originally from Athens, Georgia. I grew up in a rural area. I was very fortunate that both sets of grandparents were advocates of nature. On my mom's side, Ginger and Perry Jackson owned a farm. So I know what it's like to go outside and have pigs, cows, horses. I have a very vivid memory of going out to my grandmother's garden and picking out food that we would eat.
Remember how old you were then?
Oh gosh, probably 6.
Yeah.
That memory. Yeah. But then on my dad's side, William and Mary Breeding, they had a botanical garden in front of their house. Like, I remember digging some of those garden beds. I even remember in elementary school, we would take field trips to my grandmother's house in Greensboro, Georgia, because it looked like, the classic southern garden with the magnolias and the hydrangeas and the lantana. She was a big advocate of nature and gardening. So that led me to go into landscape architecture. I got my master's in landscape architecture from the University of Tennessee. And then I would go ahead and get another master's in land and property development from Texas A&M. So that's how I ended up here in Texas. Love Texas. It reminds me of Georgia culture. Georgia, the Southeast has that kind of free spirited, get it out the mud type of mentality. Work in the construction industry, land development industry, and the landscape architecture industry here and all together for about 15 years before I started my own company. So I currently own Jackson Bree and Consulting Group.
Nice. So before we go back to jewelry,
Okay.
I want to I call them hot spots. We have these moments in life, we all know about them, where something, it doesn't have to be like really logical, and typically sometimes they're not. They're more ethereal and emotional, but it's a spot of something that influenced you at that moment. And I was picking up about 6 years old, so I'm not surprised you get the 6 there. So can we dig into that a little bit? Oh yeah, yeah. Tell me, like, what were you feeling? What do you remember about that moment?
It was, but I come from both sides of the family where hard work is really important. Like, you have to, you reap what you sow. If you put in a lot to that sowing, the harvest will be plentiful. So I just remember my grandmother one day being like, hey, you need to know where everything comes from, your food, your clothes, because there are people that work hard to create that, and that way you'll appreciate it. So I remember specifically planting those collard greens that I ate.
And you remember specifically?
Yeah, I remember
those
specifically.
Collard greens and consuming them.
Exactly. Oh, they were so good. We're country, so she made the collard greens, then the cornbread, and she taught me how to mash it together with my hands. And you can't have it without Texas Pete hot sauce on top of it. So that came next. But no, just realizing like, hey, this came out of the ground because of my hands, and now I'm consuming it for nutrition, to make me stronger, to make me a better human being. And the love that my grandmother put into that, it just all made sense. Like, oh wow, this is a really unique system here that we have.
That's beautiful. Yeah, and in today's world, we're moving so quickly with disconnection, which is our core. Some of the ancient wisdom, the seers talk about it being a true sin. In the words of sin is our disconnection from earth and from each other. And what a profound, beautiful lesson your grandmother gave, right? What's her name? What was her name?
Ginger Jackson.
Nice.
And then I gotta give honor to Mary Braden too, because she was the one that I would go to nature centers with her. We would pick out plants and I would plant them, and then to see that grow into something so beautiful, it just really taught me that hard work pays off, and that we have to care for the land that we have.
Yeah. And so my message to people watching this, I'm a master sometimes of stating the obvious, but get your kids away from the phones for once in a while.
Yes.
Get them out in the dirt.
Yes.
Get them to plant something, and then get them to cook something. Help them cook. But that is such a perfect, beautiful lesson. So simple wisdom can sometimes be the greatest teachers.
Correct.
Awesome. Let's come back to you, ma'am. Tell me now, with all of your inspiration, what is it that you're doing in the world? What have you created? Help our listeners understand what you're up to.
Yeah, so it wasn't until about 2 years later after we moved in that I became a master naturalist and master gardener in 2019.
And for the listeners, what does that mean?
That means you learn how to garden really well, and you learn to understand and appreciate the geology in which expresses what wildlife can live above that geology. So, for example, in the state of Texas, there's 11 different ecoregions, which then define what can be living above ground. And that then influences the wildlife and the land and what it provides.
So in some ways, it seems to me, for someone who doesn't have an expertise in this, but let me just try this out on you and see if this works. It's kind of remembering our indigenous brothers and sisters through science to reconnect in a way that brings us back. Is that close?
Yes. Okay. In a very antiseptic way.
Yeah.
And just depending upon your own nature, will you then create with it and see how it comes out and expresses itself within you.
That's deep.
Yeah.
Because that is so true, right? Knowledge, especially today with artificial intelligence, is becoming a commodity, right? So it's how you consume your own spirit into the information, and that's a perfect example, right?
And being armed with this new knowledge and looking at cemetery next door, which was covered in evergreen, which I was very happy about the first 2 years because
Right.
I didn't want to know that it was there. And it was a nice buffer to the street, the sound, that I realized I was living next door to a natural disaster. And when you're living right next door to a natural disaster, when you're armed with knowledge, you can't keep turning your head
A
away.
natural disaster for what do you
Invasive vegetation was taking over the land to the point where you couldn't even walk into the cemetery. And so I gathered my neighbors, and it took us about 3 months on our hands and knees, removing that privet. And literally within 3 months, a sea of Engelmann daisies, just huge drift, showcased itself that was previously buried because it couldn't receive the light of day.
just saying back in it?
Thank you. Exactly. And the Blackland prairie started to express itself in a way that I realized, oh my God, we're living next door to not only a remnant historic cemetery, but a remnant Blackland prairie. And what I've learned through understanding and appreciating what I had next door now is that these seed banks that are left dormant and buried over time because of this natural disaster, in a way protected the vegetation, the seed banks below. So once we removed that vegetation that was invasive.
So seed banks are just like dormant potential of
Yes.
the species that exist.
Exactly. Before man came to this area.
Interesting. So it just kind of
Exactly.
hangs out and says, I'm here if you want me.
Exactly. And then during this time of restoration where we're taking out the privet, a woman by the name of Suzanne Starling, a historian, stopped and said, thank you so much for taking care of the cemetery. Back in the 80s, I stopped a plot of land from development because a home was about to be built on it. And she handed me the book, Land is the Cry, which is about the story of Warren Angus Ferris, who lived homesteaded in the neighborhood, had 640 acres, and that cemetery was first started when his 2-year-old son died, and then he opened it to the local community, which were far and few between, because he happened to be the first person to survey all of Texas all of Dallas before Dallas was a city.
When it was surveyed, just general survey
to lay out the lines for the city of Dallas.
Nice. Wow.
And nobody knows who he is. That's what is a chronic problem. We're so disconnected from nature, and we're so disconnected from those who've come before us that don't necessarily have to be our ancestors, but to appreciate whose shoulders we stand on in this environment that we are today.
Yeah, and that's a whole nother conversation of
Yes.
who aren't our ancestors, right?
Exactly.
So at a deep level, you're connecting
Exactly.
all relations.
Exactly. Exactly. And so as a creative, I'm a photographer, was a photographer by trade, and now retired. I realized I had an aha moment where here we have two entities that usually don't coexist, that are separate.
The two histories.
Cultural history and natural history. And hardly do they ever come together. And I realized this is how we can cast a wider net of building more interest. Because if we're always talking to the same crowd who's drunk the Kool-Aid about nature, you're not going to gain a new audience to educate them about the importance of land preservation and vice versa. And I happen to be one of those that didn't care about the local culture until Suzanne Starling gave me the book, and I realized how valuable this man was, and his story is rich and needs to be told. And so it was the makings, the beginnings of realizing that we had something very special next door. And we created a 2-year pilot called the Constellation of Living Memorials. There's 5 cemeteries in South Dallas that are participating in a 2-year pilot. And within the first year, we've blown ourselves out of the roof in regards to proof of concept. We were featured last year. We were on the stage here at EarthX, and that garnered the attention of Dallas News, and where they featured us on the front cover of the Metro section. And that, a couple months later, we got the attention of the New York Times, and we were highlighted on the cover of the New York Times back at the end of November, which then led to Maine University reaching out and saying, we want the constellation for the state of Maine. Let's create a guide together.
Nice.
So that's where I'm at right now. So that's the magic of the infinite intelligence, bringing it, making it all happen. Because how do you create something like this? Yeah. Especially when you come from a background of commercial photography. This is so not within my scope.
But you surrendered and
I surrendered.
low and watched the magic and followed the signs and did the hard work, right?
Yeah.
Tell me, Corrin, tell me about what you're doing in the world. What's the action? What people want to hear, like, what are you up to? What's happening? What is it that you do?
So currently I own a small landscape architecture firm and project management firm, and I create outdoor spaces. I have some park projects going on in Dallas. I have a senior living facility client, helping with the Texas Southern University master plan. So that's what I like doing.
Plan of their
Well, they're adding 3 additional buildings to their campus, and I'm helping with the design team design like the landscape around those areas. Yeah. So I also have gotten into historic conservation through utilizing landscape architecture and cultural conservation as well. So how I ended up with the Constellation of Living Memorials about 2 years ago.
you guys are working together.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
we are. I mean, it's a great fit, very great fit. How I got involved, I had a mentor, Christopher Hunter. He has his PhD in architecture. He's actually a professor at Texas A&M University now. That's where we both met back in the day. He approached me because he studies historic African-American churches. He goes around the country doing that. He was like, you know what, it would be great if I had someone with a landscape background to study these historic cemeteries that are located adjacent to some of these churches. And at that time, I'm somewhat new into business entrepreneurship, and I'm like, man, I'm kind of too busy for that. I was like, I felt a higher calling, and I was like, let me tap into this, because when I was younger, we would go to the cemetery with family from Georgia and Birmingham, Alabama. Anytime we would travel to Alabama, we would always go to the cemetery.
So there was something that transcended the rational in you, that you trusted and followed.
Correct.
Nice.
And just knowing how important cemeteries are to some people in the population, I was like, let me dig deep.
So that was the second part, though. The first part was the rational. What are my thoughts? What am I doing? I can't scale. I don't have time for this stuff.
Yeah.
And then you felt something.
Yeah.
Tell me if I don't want to put words in it, but you felt something in your body, something deeper of wisdom that was guiding you, and then you reconnected the rational to what you just told us.
Correct.
Is that that one down?
You're spot on. And on top of that, you can't tell your mentor no. I can't say. Yeah. You don't want to let down someone you look up to, but no, it opened up this world where we looked at pre-emancipation cemeteries from the lens of spatial, spiritual, and physical aspects. And so, to make a very long story short,
heavy.
Yeah, it was heavy. Yeah, it was really heavy. And I looked at 3 cemeteries in particular. You have Pierce Chapel African Cemetery in Columbus, Georgia. Great story. Yamona Pierce, who's a part of the Hamilton Hood, or the founder of the Hamilton Hood Foundation, is over that. She has an awesome story. I looked at Fineman Cemetery here in Dallas, Texas, and I also looked at the Lutheran Cemetery in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
And when you looked at them, you were researching.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us again.
Yeah. I was researching those cemeteries and actually paid 2 of them a visit.
What about it, though? What did you research?
Oh,
spatial,
buried, physical.
Whether there's tombstones or not.
Correct.
Okay.
So the spatial, and I go a little bit deep into each when I mention. So the spatial was looking at how are these cemeteries, where are they, how are they arranged, looking at factors that are replicated once you analyze them. And what we found was a lot of the cemetery, and remind you, these cemeteries were created by enslaved individuals. So we got to keep that in mind, and about what was going on at that time, and the things that they couldn't do. Like, they weren't able to make their own decisions how they lived their daily lives half the time. But
Never mind how they finished their lives and were taken care of with respect.
correct.
They were buried, right?
Correct. And you would think someone that was under so much harsh treatment, when it came to burying somebody, they wouldn't be concerned about that person. Like, hey, just throw them in the hole, let's get back to work. But no, they actually took care of them very well. So going to the physical aspect, we saw that a lot of these.
That surprised.
Yeah.
In a good way.
Yeah. There was a lot of some of that tradition they believe is passed down from African traditions and also Aboriginal. Aboriginal. What's the word I'm looking for? Practices.
Okay.
So from a physical standpoint, we saw that a lot of these cemeteries were located on a ridge, overlooking a body of water, and typically surrounded by trees and nature. That's one aspect. The second aspect was the physical. If you look at Pierce Chapel in Columbus, Georgia, unfortunately there are not a lot of tombstones, but they use plant material to identify the locations of the grave.
And you were able to, after all those years, figure that out.
Yeah, they're like there's some old yucca and periwinkle that's still growing in some of these areas. We'll get to that more in depth when the spiritual comes.
Also, let me interrupt you for a minute, because I didn't connect fully on this.
Okay.
So this is during slavery.
Yeah.
There's like zero rights and total abuse and all that disgusting part of humanity. When they were put to rest, was it the people that were allowed to take their own people and put them to rest with respect?
Yes.
Okay, that was my disconnect before.
Yes.
Because I didn't even know that would be allowed to happen.
Yeah,
Right? Okay.
Yeah, they would allow them to bury their dead, and there's also journal entries from people visiting plantations and saying how immaculate these funeral processions were.
Yeah.
So they really took this serious. Going back to the physical, we also noticed that, like the example of the one Lutheran cemetery in Baton Rouge, they stacked the graves on top of one another, mainly number one because of the lack of space, but also because they wanted to be close to their loved ones. Like, I want to be buried in the same area where my mom, my grandfather, my great grandfather is buried.
A lot of spiritual history to that, which we'll get into the way.
Correct. So that's a great segue. So going back to spiritual, being next to water, they view water as a conduit to the next phase of life. And also some believe that they also saw it as a way back to the motherland, was through water. Some of the graves were also oriented east to west because of the biblical verse about Gabriel blowing his trumpet. They wanted to already be facing in that direction, so when they raise up out the ground, they're facing the direction that the sound of the trumpet is coming from. And this is my favorite part, and ties in greatly into what I studied and what I learned as far as landscape architecture and how I use it today, is that they use plant material because they believe, through the processes of the plant, they will soak up the essence of that person and they will live on. Mm-hmm. So there's a great video of a woman out of Louisiana who goes to her ancestral burial grounds, and she touches a tree and she's like, I'm touching my ancestor. Yeah. I'm talking to my ancestors.
Were they, and for our listeners, we thought this was going to be a 20, 25-minute clip, but hang in here because this is really cool stuff. And so we don't care about time right now. You guys good?
We're great.
Okay.
Great.
So let's get a little bit more specific. So there's a wonderful saying that I heard from somebody about the way that we bury our people. And it's the most selfish thing we can do. Oh, you get it?
I get it.
Okay, so when I first heard that a bunch of years ago, I thought, oh my God, it was so right. It's like we create this big metal freaking box that sits there. How come we're not giving back and going back to our home and allowing our spirit to fill the trees and the plants, right? So that's what you're talking about, because they didn't have
I'm guessing it was pretty simple boxes, or maybe even not going straight into the earth.
From what we've seen, well, outside of the cemetery in Louisiana, they would stack using sometimes stone casts, like the stone
Just around,
boxes. Yeah,
but open so they can go back to the earth.
correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so I'm glad. I'm not surprised that's that connection of back to Mother Earth when you came, to be able to give that rather than box yourself and separate yourself, which is where we started from the beginning about the original sin of separateness.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's such sacredness of going back to the earth and being able to share yourself back to all the creatures.
Correct.
Tell me what the future is.
Yes,
And where you're going and what your vision is, and
absolutely.
anything else that's on your mind,
Yeah.
since we're just having fun.
Yeah. Well,
Let me
we're
hold that so a little closer. Yes.
so we're reimagining historic cemeteries for community engagement to reconnect humanity back to nature, one historic cemetery at a time.
Okay, here's a question. What if someone says, they're dead? What's the big deal? I mean, let's plow it over and let's get productive and build a house on it. And yeah, I know that's spiritual stuff, but I don't really listen to that. And then what's the purpose in this? And how would you respond to that?
Well, in the state of Texas, I can't speak for the other states. The law is that if there's a cemetery that a developer wants to process that land and they don't know it's a cemetery, because most oftentimes the headstones have been vandalized.
Because they find out during the process.
And if it's been brought to their attention, they have to hire a professional archaeologist to conduct the study. And then if it's proven that there's a cemetery where the developer has a choice to then either exhume the bodies and move them elsewhere or leave it as is. And in this case, with the Warren Fair Cemetery, he chose to leave it as is.
So the law is already recognized.
Yes, but it's still
people.
not protected. So for developers who are really greedy and just see the almighty dollar and not the spiritual essence of the space. Oh yeah. Oh, the time.
It's me attempting to be.
Yes, of course.
So they're actually greedy developers.
Oh yes. Well,
Yeah.
and they see a lot that's right for the picking, and
They're wasting what the laws have said.
there's the ways. And so what we are also bringing to urban environments is, as our cities grow, and as you well know, Dallas will grow 100% by the year 2050. And so that means we're going to be losing more landscape on the fringes of where we are right now that will be urbanized. So we're going to be losing more land that will be all the more destructive to the wildlife that are on the fringes. So the lowest hanging fruit right now are these historic cemeteries that nobody cares about, because right now here in Dallas, almost every other block you go, you're going to bump into a historic cemetery that's either neglected or poorly taken care of. And we've come up with a solution of through community engagement to reactivate our connection to Mother Nature through cemeteries. So this is where we're celebrating the circle of life. Right. So what does that look like? We have partnered with Texas A&M Agri, where we have master naturalists and master gardeners working to help restore. We have 4-H students. These are children that are coming in to learn entomology as well
Now you're
as
integrating
nature.
the whole education and the revitalization and the preservation.
Exactly.
You know what you're demonstrating here, which is really wonderful, is we talk about this all the time at Conscious Capital Foundation. And our head of operations, Josh Sens, reminds me all the time of behavioral science and always focusing on the positive versus the negative, right? So you could come in with, guns saying, hey, we mythical, that's not it, but come in and saying, hey, look, we got this laws here, we got to protect this, and you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. And you've turned the whole thing upside down into such a positive thing through many different constituents. that's just brilliant work, and that personifies what we talked about here at the foundation. So really well done.
Thank you. We're creating a paradigm shift in land management in the cemeteries that nobody cares about, that are also going to increase the property values around the homes. So starting in South Dallas, this is going to help beautify these areas, which then, talking about public health, changes the consciousness of the local community, where they start taking care of their homes and they start feeling a certain sense of pride that behaviorally they're carrying around pride, a certain pride within their consciousness, because their space is beautified. I mean, one begets the other. Now,
So I'm going to ask a question you probably don't know the answer to. I'd be amazed if you do. But even just conceptually, think about I wonder what the square footage is or acreage is just in the United States that would cover. I mean, you're almost doing like a Rockefeller project through a creative.
we are. Well, in the state, I have a map. I hope you come to a 15-minute closing of our
When is this?
today, and you will see the map of Texas with all the cemeteries. You will see
It's
how
probably mind-blowing, is it?
much land that takes up. And if you imagine, there's 15,000 to 50,000 historic cemeteries that have been identified. We think, well, why is there such a big gap between both of those numbers? Well, it's really hard to account for cemeteries that are either on private land or that has been mentioned but has not been documented in the county records. So that's the reason why
I can imagine like, a rancher that thinks there might be a, graveyard out there. Probably not first call is to you guys. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So
That was another joke, right? We can keep that one in.
and then you cut to the sauce machine thought.
Well, that's good. My bad joke.
No, that's okay.
Here's where I'd love to. Here's where I'd love to wrap up with you guys. Tell people directly. We know the intellectual reasons. We also know the spiritual reasons why they should care. But how can they get involved? Like, if something we've talked about so far really touches them, which I think it's going to many of our listeners, because boy, I mean, you don't normally wake up in the morning and say, "Boy, I wonder how I can beautify a graveyard," right? But when you take this whole mission that you've put together, it's so beautiful. How can people get involved with you guys?
Yes,
Please tell
so
our listeners.
please, we have a volunteer page on our website. We are also opening up the gates way before we imagined in regards to inviting other cemeteries who are interested in taking at least an eighth of their land, at minimum of an eighth of their land, and turning it into a wildlife sanctuary. That is, we want the least path of resistance to invite as many cemeteries to become a star in expanding our constellation.
Oh, that's beautiful. Final words?
Yes, I just want to say that this concept is nothing that's new. When I was doing my research, I was meeting a lot of older people that would say, like, hey, back in the day, we used to have picnics at the park. We had weddings at the park. We had, we would visit the cemetery. I'm sorry, I said the park. We would have picnics at the cemetery. We'd go play in the park.
Slip, though, right?
Yeah,
them was in the park.
It was a park. Yeah, it was considered a park. So this is nothing unorthodox, nothing that hasn't been done before.
So deeply cultural.
Yeah, it is.
And you moving in saying, my God, thank God for the trees, before you reconnected, and then other generations and other cultures having picnics.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how the humans work, right?
Correct.
Wow, I cut you off though.
Oh, no.
Fascinating.
No.
The park, so they would have picnics.
They would have picnics there. They would have weddings there. They would have very frequent family gatherings there. I met a guy who was like, yeah, anytime I go back, he's from Alabama. He's like, anytime I go back to Alabama, me and my family have a cookout at the cemetery.
So does that now reinvigorate that next generation? Is that possible as you open up these overgrown cemeteries and restore them? Do you see any of that coming back in with the next generation, or is that a long shot?
Yes, I've actually seen some requests for proposals of reimagining how existing cemeteries can expand and wanting more park space and wanting more of that communal feel. Like, hey, this is an area for the community to congregate. So I definitely see that coming out. And I think once people see the successful models of it that Julie is creating, I think it'll galvanize people to do the same.
You guys are awesome. This was a lot of fun. Thank you for coming. And we will be following you down, our camera crew, to tell us now next for the listeners. What are you guys going to be doing?
Yeah, so we are we're providing closing remarks for today for North Texas Earth Day. We're going to be sharing our progress that we've made in the past year and a half and how EarthX has, as a platform, has impacted us in a way that has catapulted us into the stars. So
Awesome.
thank you, EarthX.
And then you're going to join us back for the gala.
Oh yeah,
Tuesday night, right?
Yeah.
any reason to party?
Yes.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Any reason to celebrate?
Wonderful.